Have you noticed that this show doesn't have any commercials? I'm not selling you diapers or vitamins or smoothies or gasoline. That's because I don't want any corporate sponsors telling me what I can investigate or what I can say. Instead, you are our sponsors. This is a production by our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. So if you want more investigations, if you want landmark legal wins, if you want hard-hitting news, if you want the truth, go to ICANDecide.org and donate now. All right, everyone, we ready?
Yeah! Let's do this.
Action. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there in the world. It's time for us all to step out into the high wire. Well, there's a lot of conversations right now, especially around, U.S. politics and MAHA and Trump and Republicans and Democrats. We're going to get into a lot of that today. But one of the big conversations really is there now a rift somehow between Robert Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump? Are they throwing away any attempt to do something about the vaccine program, which is a big concern amongst many of you that watch this show? And I saw a headline in an article that really, made me think it's time to address this. And this is the headline that I saw. It's raw story. Trump can't fire this deeply unpopular official, and it's driving him mad, says a biographer close to Donald Trump. Trump wants to fire Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because of his anti-vaccine policies, which Wolf said are deeply unpopular everywhere. It goes on to say they don't want to fire him because the MAHA constituency is significant, they feel, to the Trump base, Wolf said. So they want him to go away, but not go away mad. Very interesting article there. And I want to approach this, and I don't have any inside scoop. I'm not talking to Bobby a lot, even though we worked together to get him into that place. But I just want to give you my perspective as really a journalist. And I think you know me. I study people. I study what motivates them. I try to strategize around that on the issues that we deal with here on the high wire. But I want to push back on this idea. First of all, I want to explain something. We talk all the time about the fact that the pharmaceutical industry is the one funding all of the media. Pharma marketers, here he goes, a perfect example, spent more than $10 billion on prescription drug ads just last year. About half of the total spending can be attributed to television advertising per iSpot's 2024 calculation of $5.15 billion in prescription drug TV spending. So I've talked about this all the time. 50 to 70% of all advertising is funded by the pharmaceutical industry. You can test this yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. Just count the ads at every commercial break, especially on the news programs you're watching, and recognize that those news anchors are employed by those ads. That is how we see television. That is what media actually is. Who's ever paying for it is who you're actually working for. Forget whatever it's CNN or Fox or, whatever branding there is. So when pharma wants to push an agenda, it makes us all believe across multiple platforms that this is the world that we live in and it's being reported on. One of the problems we have, I think, right now in Washington, D.C. is your average politician probably goes home and says, well, what's on CNN? Okay, I'm going to get the other perspective. I'm going to go over to Fox. And in both those spaces, it looks like they're not really interested in the vaccine issue. They're turning on it. Well, but both of those are still funded and taken care of by the same industries. The problem with our politics is it's not talking to you. It's not talking to me. Even the polls are designed so that the media can make us believe, to propagandize us into believing a world that we live in, when it's not actually a litmus test of who we are, what we are. It's trying to program us to believe that's who we are. And I'm going to use this article as an example. Can we go back to the quotes in this article, essentially, where they're saying Trump wants to fire his health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because of He's saying Bobby's anti-vaccine policies, meaning Trump essentially just got more than he bargained for. He didn't want to get into all this. Really? That's all Bobby? Let's go back to let's just go ahead and pull up a 2014 tweet by Donald Trump before he was ever president of the United States. He said this: healthy young child goes to doctor, gets pumped with massive shot of many vaccines, doesn't feel good, and changes. Autism, all caps, many such cases. He didn't have to do that. That wasn't a quote by Del Batry or Robert Kennedy Jr. That was Donald Trump himself. In fact, he so believed in that and had a perspective on that it came up when he did really get into the middle of really running for president the first time. Almost every single debate, they would try to attack him on this position he was holding, and he didn't back down. Remember this moment?
A backlash against vaccines was blamed for a measles outbreak here in California. Donald Trump has publicly and repeatedly linked childhood vaccines to autism, which, as you know, the medical community adamantly disputes.
Autism has become an epidemic. 25 years ago, 35 years ago, you look at the statistics, not even close. People that work for me just the other day, 2 years old, 2.5 years old, a child, a beautiful child, went to have the vaccine and came back and a week later got a tremendous fever, got very, very sick, now is autistic.
Jake Tapper describes that moment as he has said repeatedly on the campaign trail that vaccines cause autism. Again, wasn't running with Robert Kennedy Jr. Robert Kennedy Jr. had nothing to do with that campaign. That was President, or soon to be President Donald Trump, all on his own. Now I wanted, well, did he change his mind? Has he changed his perspective now that he's been in office all this time? I want to point to the moment where we finally were getting some action from Robert Kennedy Jr. as HHS Secretary. He was finally going to discuss one of the causes of autism. We were all hanging on the edges of our seat. And when he came forward and, was there with Donald Trump and wanted to talk about this new discovery, it ended up being Tylenol. Now, perhaps that was a safe place to start, and it looks like Bobby didn't want to go near vaccines, at least not in that conversation, but somebody did. Watch this.
Today, we are announcing two important findings from our autism work that are vital for parents to know as they make these decisions. First, HHS will act on acetaminophen. The FDA is responding to clinical and laboratory studies that suggest a potential association between acetaminophen use during pregnancy and adverse neurodevelopmental outcomes, including later diagnosis for ADHD and autism. Today, the FDA will issue a physician's notice about the risk of acetaminophen during pregnancy and begin the process to initiate a safety label change.
I just recommend strongly that you don't use Tylenol unless it's absolutely necessary. I understand it's maybe 10% of the women that are pregnant are, would perhaps be forced to use it. So don't take Tylenol. Other things that we recommend, or certainly I do anyway, is, and it's so important to me to see the doctor 4 times or 5 times for a vaccine. Don't let them pump your baby up with the largest pile of stuff you've ever seen in your life going into the delicate little body of a baby. Even if it's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you just break it up into, I would say 5, but let's say 4 visits to the doctor instead of 1. But they say that there's no problem if you do each shot separately, not put together.
I mean, look, Robert Kennedy Jr., the man for the vaccine issue, the one that was, going to be looking at the vaccines and did, reduce the vaccine program down to the Denmark schedule from 54 vaccines to about 26, or 17 diseases down to about 11. But in that, clearly, I don't know, we're being told that Bobby's being silenced, that he's not supposed to talk about this. Maybe that's true. I don't know who's telling him that, but he's being quiet in that moment. And Donald Trump, actually, if you watch the whole thing, seemed annoyed. Was annoyed, like, when are we going to get to the issue that I really care about, which is vaccines and autism? Bobby, we're working on that, right? We're working on that. And so now the media, and especially biographers close to Donald Trump, want us to believe that Donald Trump is frustrated with Bobby Kennedy's vaccine, position. Really? I think that flies in the face of the actual facts. And I think one of the things that really determines that, and I do think there's politics. I do think coming into the midterms, there are those who will say, hey, let's stick to the real bread and butter issues like the food supply that nobody can argue with. Getting ultra processed foods out of our children's school lunches, huge winner, Democrats and Republicans. So who doesn't want broad appeal? So maybe they're, softening up a little bit. But this idea that Trump is turned on Bobby, it could be true. I'm not psychic, but what I'm telling you is what I know to be true about human beings. And let's be honest, there was concern that the DOJ under President Trump was not going to appeal the American Academy of Pediatrics decision, which obviously erased that vaccine shift and erased Robert Kennedy Jr.'s ACIP committee. But then just last week, we found out that, lo and behold, they are going to appeal that decision. DOJ appeals vaccine policy injunction in American Academy of Pediatrics versus Kennedy, escalating landmark ACIP fight. So for guys that didn't want a vaccine conversation out there in the public during the midterms, it's going to be really hard to not talk about one of the most important judicial fights we've ever seen. And so all of this to say, they want us to feel weakened. They want us to feel broken. There's even some on our side that are a little bit worried that MAHA is falling apart. I think today we'll talk about some of those issues. But if MAHA doesn't just now end up, moving the Republican Party, but also the Democratic Party, doesn't that mean it's growing, not necessarily collapsing? I think what we've got to look at are what are motivations. And if I know Donald Trump, which I don't think any of us can say that we do, but it does seem that a person that for year upon year upon year states publicly they have a serious opinion on an issue, something clearly struck close to home for President Trump that has made him stand on this issue every single election without ever backing away. I can only assume he's gotten even deeper into this conversation in private dinners with friends and family on golf courses, for all of those years. Do you really believe someone that has laid that much stake, has actually risked his own presidential campaigns to talk about an issue, is just going to look the other way, walk away because it just doesn't seem popular? He knew it wasn't popular. There was no one else on the 20 politicians on that stage that would jump up with him and say they thought vaccines cause autism. He knows what he's up against. He knows what he's dealing with. And sure, maybe Susie Wiles right next to him, if Dr. Robert Malone is right, doesn't like Robert Kennedy Jr., probably never did. And maybe the other people in his cabinet, maybe there's a lot, probably are, that don't like Robert Kennedy Jr. But the only person I think that it actually matters when the midterms are over, if these guys manage to not be impeached but actually get a little wind under their wings and at their backs, the only guy I think matters is Donald Trump. And the only relationship we should really be thinking about is how did these two guys get along together? And I've been watching Robert Kennedy Jr. do a really good job of protecting Donald Trump, even on moments that were difficult. So before you lose sleep, before you start really screaming bloody murder, let's just look at the history of what brings us here and recognize maybe the media is not telling us what's actually going on, but what they want us to believe is going on. We're going to talk more about this. One of the great things that Donald Trump did was to withdraw us from the WHO, formally withdraws from World Health Organization. We pulled our funding. Awesome. Does that mean it's the end of any World Health Organization pandemic taking over America? Well, I have Tess Lawrie joining me. One of the founders of the World Council for Health, and she has been involved in a deep investigation in the WHO. And as it turns out, we may not be as disentangled as you thought. I'm looking forward to that conversation. But first, it's time for the Jackson Report. All right, Jeffrey. It's wild coming off of a week like last week. I feel like I went to battle like a gladiator. We just, we took hides, we took land, we took castles, and then, the next week you're like, all right, you just watch the repercussions, and I'm still strapped for battle, Jeffrey. I want in.
Yeah.
But it was a good week. It was a
stay
good
strapped
week
in because we have a full deck today for the Jackson
Okay.
Report. I'm sitting here about to talk to you about what's going on in the world, and I'm having some COVID vibes from 2020 when I look at the news like this. Take a look.
What began as a cruise of a lifetime has instead turned into a major medical mystery and an international crisis.
Health investigators covered in protective gear boarded a cruise ship Monday, working to curb an outbreak of the deadly hantavirus, a severe respiratory illness believed to be linked to 3 deaths and 4 other passengers and crew members who are ill.
The luxury cruise liner now a ghost town with its nearly 150 passengers quarantined.
There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's the hardest part.
As a precaution, passengers have been asked to remain in their cabins while disinfection and other public health measures are carried out.
The Dutch ship, carrying close to 150 people, including 17 Americans, initially took off from a port in Argentina in early April. Now, World Health investigators say it's possible the ill passengers became infected during their time off the ship.
This was an expedition boat, and many of the people on board were doing bird watching. They were doing, a lot of things with wildlife.
Research shows that it has a high mortality rate of 40%. Up to 40% of those infected have died. This is a highly fatal disease.
Jeffrey, they have been fishing for some, fear hook, whether it monkeypox flopped and then this bird flu and we just murdered ostriches. It's such a big deal. Nobody seemed to care. But this one, I think they should go whole hog with this one. This one's got people's attention. I have so many texts coming in, people going, are we all going to die of hantavirus? I mean, it's amazing. 7.5 billion people right now are terrified because 3 people have died.
Right. And it seems like a lot of what we do here is unpack the spin and tease out reality from the corporate media hype that's going on.
Yeah.
Hype like this. I mean, you just saw that. But here's this headline here out of the Washington Post. Authorities scramble to limit hantavirus outbreak, trace contacts around the globe. Oh, my God, this thing's spreading around the globe. Well, let's talk about this hantavirus because many people are hearing this for the first time. It's all over the news. It was first discovered in the late 70s after the Korean War. A lot of American soldiers were getting sick. And its main route of transmission is aerosolized, basically feces and urine and droppings and saliva from rats. So what happens is this gets aerosolized when it gets kicked up in a small space, perhaps cleaning, maybe a small space like a cruise ship. If there's some sitting there and people are cleaning, that gets kicked up and people breathe this in through their lungs. You can get this through contact, but it's extremely hard to get this from person-to-person transmission. Most of this is rodent to person or the droppings of a rodent. So as we know right now, the cruise ship departed from Argentina. It was sailing through the South Atlantic. 3 people have died. 8 are believed to have the virus. Going to get into that in a second. But let's go to the CDC, because what does this mean for Americans? Well, the CDC reported cases of hantavirus. Listen to this. As of the end of 2023, 890 cases of hantavirus disease were reported in the United States since surveillance began in 1993. All right, so let's do some quick math here. That's 30 years of surveillance, 890 cases. That's about 30 cases a year on average. If you do that, the CDC says 35% of those have a mortality rate of 35%. So you do that math, it's about 10 people per year on average. Like 20 to 30 people a year get struck by lightning in the United States. So that's giving you the odds ratio there. And interestingly enough, about 94%, according to the CDC, says west of the Mississippi River are the cases. So if you're on the East Coast, you're statistically immunized from this, essentially, when it comes to the odds. But let's look at Newsweek here, because it goes into further. This is actually a decent report. It says the morbid reason why hantavirus is unlikely to be the next pandemic. And it says Andes virus, the only human transmissible strain among roughly 50 species of hantavirus, does so poorly that even on a ship with hundreds of people in close quarters, a worst case scenario for disease spread, transmission remained rare and limited to people with closest contact. That goes on to quote an expert here, a public health expert. Hantavirus would need to make a major evolutionary leap to become a pandemic threat, Weiss told Newsweek. That would likely require multiple coordinated changes affecting how the virus enters human cells, replicates in human tissues, and evades early immune defenses. Hantavirus does not currently spread well enough between people for that to be an easy and plausible evolutionary path.
I feel like it should say,
the recipe
but we're working on it. We got it in a gain of function. We will figure out a way to make this thing spread better. Trust us. Now, that's not his point, but someone is. Yeah.
Yes, and there's other, data points that we look for when we see these stories pop up. Here's one of them, 2024 news release, press release. Korean University Vaccine Innovation Center collaborates with Moderna on mRNA-based hantavirus vaccine development. It's a very rare disease. Even in Argentina, even where they're having a higher than normal outbreak this year, there's only a little over 100 cases. So that's interesting that seems to be a market.
Jeffrey, right there, that headline is something I've really been trying to get across to people. They will make a vaccine for anything, and they'll be able to make you personalize an insanely rare risk. This will be one of the most rare issues we've dealt with, just short of Japanese encephalitis, which we did a whole show on years ago, which was absolutely hysterical. But can you imagine spending R&D, millions of dollars on R&D for an issue that kills maybe 10 people of the 340 million Americans every single year? But it's valuable because all they have to do is 100% effective. Do you really want to take the risk? What would you do if your child died of the hantavirus? How would you forgive yourself? Should we call Child Protective Services if you don't get it for them? And then all of a sudden, 340 million shots will be sold, or close to it, 90, 80% of them, to be like, oh, you're right. I mean, better safe than sorry. And that's what they know. And so they will make a vaccine for an almost non-existent problem because it'll still sell like hotcakes.
Exactly. Average of 30 cases a year. Meanwhile, millions of Americans are dying from a preventable chronic disease epidemic. And thank God we're hearing more about that since Kennedy jumped in there. Otherwise, we'd be just focusing on these limited little issues. Not, people are still dying. Don't want to make too much light of that. But here's the issue, though, because they're saying now the big story is, where are these contacts? They're around the globe. We have to search them. So the virus is really only transmissible when the person is symptomatic. And even then, it's very difficult. You have to have a close contact. It's not something like the flu. It's not something like COVID, where this thing is, if you're in a cubicle next to someone, you could possibly grab this. So and the problem is the incubation period is up to 8 weeks. So the issue is the PCR test now that they're using. Here's a headline here. Hantavirus PCR test sequences repeatedly match human DNA, raises false positive concerns. So we have that issue now too, going into this whole mix, just like COVID. We have to question this. We have this wisdom coming out of COVID of the false positives. So we have to bring this forward now, whether it's bird flu, whether it's monkeypox, whether it's hantavirus. Those are all issues that we have to face on this. And this appears to be a limited outbreak, but you never can tell. I don't want to say never.
You're right, absolutely. And COVID started out kind of like this, with Tony Fauci saying it's never going to be a problem in America. But then they realized, actually, it'd be great if it was a problem in America. So much to be gained there. Yeah. All right, well, we're watching
now, I want to piggyback off your opener, talking about MAHA. And, just last week, it was last Monday, or I guess 2 Mondays ago now, we had the march in D.C., People versus Poison. This was the Supreme Court case where Bayer was asking the Supreme Court to appeal its cancer-causing glyphosate, cases that are burying this company and almost bankrupting it. And I want to see if people can notice something that happened at the rally. Take a look at some of this footage.
All right.
This is an important moment in the constitutional history of the United States of America.
Today's fight in the Supreme Court is one battle to take back our food system for the people.
This should not be a partisan issue, and I have been so proud to work with so many of the speakers and the advocates and the leaders here today.
What we're dealing with today with the liability shield is absolutely unacceptable.
We believe no corporation should be able to poison people and then run for protection of the Supreme Court and Congress.
Don't let the false narrative of the tribal politics distract you from the truth. This is not a left or right issue. This is a right or wrong issue.
It's unacceptable that this administration uses the power of the Defense Production Act to increase glyphosate production. appoints chemical lobbyists to run the EPA and completely gut our health.
This fight is the crossroads of where our country stands. And the politicians in Washington are going to have to make a choice. Who do they stand with?
Any farm bill that protects chemical companies over American families is not pro-farmer, it's not pro-health, it's not pro-America, is a giveaway to big chemical.
As a 20-year Democrat, I like what Bobby Kennedy's doing. I think it's really important.
Let's unite people. Let's bring our nation together. Let's put more indivisible in this one nation under God.
Now, MAHA is a major power block, political power block. And what you saw right there were Democrats stepping into this MAHA void, I guess you want to call it, at this Supreme Court case. And what you're seeing is the people that comprise MAHA, everyday Americans, have no allegiance to Republicans or Democrats. And this is what the headline at The Hill is really pointing out in people's face. Democrats seize on MAHA's growing frustration with GOP. It says many Democrats are also critical of the chemical industry, and they're leaning into what could be a natural alliance with the MAHA voters. And then it goes on to quote Representative Shelley Pingtree from Maine. She's a Democrat. She says, quote, "I have told many of my colleagues over the years, you're crazy if you don't talk to people about food and toxins." And basically trying to engage with MAHA voters she's talking about. So what we're seeing is this bipartisan MAHA shift right now in real time. And this was spoken to just last night by Thomas Massie when he was speaking to Tucker Carlson. Listen to what he had to say.
Okay.
The president is the president, and we're in the majority because there was a coalition formed. I do believe that he and his advisors were genius in setting up this coalition, and I was part of it. When I endorsed the president to try to bring on libertarians and independents, but we also brought on MAHA, which is...
I was one of the people who helped put that together.
Yeah.
Because I believed in
Well, then
that.
you're the genius.
I'm not a genius. It's just like that seemed like an obvious issue. It's obviously, they told us banning smoking was going to make us healthy and life expectancy went down. I just noticed that. And I'm like, this country's super unhealthy. And why wouldn't you make it easier for people to be healthier if they want to?
So, and by the way, I have a standalone bill too. It's the No Immunity for Glyphosate Act, and I have Republican and Democrat co-sponsors on that. But that's what MAHA is, and here's the problem: if your DOJ and your USDA and your EPA are all going to be captured by a German company and argue that Americans don't deserve their day in court if they're harmed by a chemical that's being sold and mislabeled according to their state, then you're going to alienate that part of the MAHA part of the coalition.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that could lead to a bloodbath in the November elections.
You know, Thomas Massie's been incredible on all the MAHA issues from the very beginning, years actually, you know, before we were even to Trump. I would run into Thomas Massie. He's been very vocal about COVID, about the vaccines. He believes in personal freedoms, all of it. A super interesting interview. Everyone can go check that out at Tucker Carlson. Very, very interesting. But what they're saying is true. I mean, I just want to weigh in here. It's not necessarily, I think, that the way the media, when they're asking questions at that rally, is MAHA moving over to the Democratic Party, or are they Democrats? But what I said is MAHA had a huge constituency that was Democrats. And they said, well, I thought MAHA was Republican. I said, if MAHA was Republican, it would have had no effect on the election. It clearly had an effect. It clearly brought the MAHA moms, which the numbers in women that voted for Donald Trump, which they thought would be higher with Kamala than it was with Joe Biden. Actually, Trump beat the Joe Biden numbers by, I think, 3 points. We don't know how many men and biodynamic farmers and all of that were involved, but MAHA only shifted the election because they weren't already just conservatives. It's great that Republicans and Trump and a lot of that body took on these issues, But this has been a bipartisan group that just followed Robert Kennedy Jr., who, let's remember, started his election, running as a Democrat. So, I think that's what they're missing in this issue is bipartisan. The issue of medical freedom is bipartisan. The issue of clean food is bipartisan. And maybe now the media is just waking up to it, which, when someone says MAHA is falling apart, to me, an organization that is now, or an idea or a movement that's now being embraced by all sides of the political spectrum, that's a movement that's growing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let's move past on this specific issue on glyphosate, on the Farm Bill, on Bayer's Supreme Court challenge. Let's move past the politics just for a moment and look at the science. So everyone should remember by now the Great Barrington Declaration, which really set the tone for the pandemic of the do's and don'ts, what shouldn't happen. I mean, it's an evergreen document at this point. Something just came out that mirrors that for glyphosate. Is the Seattle Statement on Glyphosate and Public Health. These are experts, over 50 public health experts, scientists, researchers. They got together and they put this out. I'm going to read some of the quotes from this. This is kind of the document now. And it talks about glyphosate and the glyphosate-based herbicides. Remember, there's a lot of other accelerants in there that aren't really tested, but are chemicals as well. And it says this: the comprehensive evidence supports this conclusion with the strongest epidemiological evidence linking exposure to increased risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer of the lymphatic system. So we know that. That's not just something that greedy lawyers made up. That's what the science suggests, and the strongest evidence suggests that. But then it goes on to say this: there's additional evidence for from human and or animal studies that glyphosate and glyphosate-based herbicides increase the risk of multiple adverse health effects in addition to cancer, including diseases of the kidney, liver, and impacts to the reproductive, endocrine, neurological, and the metabolic systems. Of course, children, infants, and fetuses are the most susceptible. And then it goes on to say something we should all know by now, that the pesticide glyphosate has been inadequately evaluated or regulated. The approval process globally for all existing and new pesticides are weak and fail to protect human health, especially for health of infants. It talks about the system needs to be fundamentally revised, but then it talks about how this should happen. And this actually is a one-to-one for vaccines too. It says the cost of obtaining such data must be borne by the pesticide industry, but the testing must be conducted by laboratories and organizations independent of the pesticide industry and free from financial conflicts of interest. So that's really the blueprint how we can move forward here. Make these companies, these chemical companies, these pharmaceutical companies, make them flip the bill for the research and make the research independent, truly independent. They don't have a hand in this anymore. They can't tell us, we did the studies on our own products, and guess what? They're safe. And the FDA can't rubber stamp them. This is a way forward. When you can see all the list of people that signed this document right here. This is really the science. This is what the EPA should be looking at. This is what all the other researchers and the Supreme Court, with all due respect, should be looking at as well. This is a settled conversation at this point with glyphosate and the glyphosate-based herbicides. And I don't know how any politician can vote against this at this point.
I agree. I think it's the writing literally is on the walls. We know all the things that give liability protection, something that's all over our food supply right at a moment where you're trying to clean up the food supply. It's a misstep, and that's all I can say. I think that what it does show you, though, with President Trump is I think that, people that like President Trump think he's a rogue player, that he acts on his own. It's also the same things that people that don't like him like. He's got an ego. He doesn't listen to anybody. But I think when you watch someone like that go in and then sort of buckle under pressure, which is, it was a huge pressure. And I try to genuinely put myself in the shoes of things I see on the news. If Bayer Monsanto came to me and said, we were going to pull our product off of every farm in America, and whether you believe in organic farming or not, they don't know how to do it. They will be devastated in year one, and by year two, they will all be bankrupt, and you will have no food, you will have no farms, we will destroy American farming, or you're going to have to do something to take care of us. It's a really very complicated situation. I keep saying it's another too big to fail moment, just like the banking. I wish he would have maybe just stopped it. Let's stockpile somewhere so we can't be threatened like this in the future as we're weaning ourselves off. But it's putting the Department of Justice in as Thomas Massie so clearly laid out, to go and defend, sit on the side of a German company against the citizens of America. It was just a step too far. I hope all of this attention is waking Donald Trump up to the fact that he does have a powerful coalition that was put together to get him there. We'd like to see the work, that, we were voting for to be conducted and finished.
Yeah, and there's a lot of eyes on the Department of Justice right now. I'm going to move on to this next story here. We have the statute of limitations for Anthony Fauci's indictment is up on May 11th. This is this coming Monday. And we have Rand Paul, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, and he's been really leading the charge with this, Massie as well. But here's the headline. Rand Paul pushes for indictment before statute of limitations expires. And that is, what are we talking about here? Well, there's really three that rise to the top. Lying to Congress, destroying federal records, and conspiring to destroy federal records. All of those, either Fauci did deliberately lying to Congress, or you have in the emails, you have evidence of him, what appears to be conspiring and destroying evidence using private servers, Gmails, handing documents to them in person at their own houses. That's Dr. David Morans, who's already indicted. And we talked to our legal team about this. The problem with this indictment is there's two hurdles. The biggest one being that former President Biden pardoned Fauci on his way out of the presidency. Right. So you have a presidential pardon. So unless Trump reverses that pardon, eliminates that, the DOJ is going to have a hard time acting. So even if that is eliminated, will the DOJ act? So there's two hurdles there. But Fauci wasn't alone. There's also a lot of other people who could be targeted for indictment. One of those, as the Brownstone Institute writes right here, is the next indictment should be against Greg Falkers. Who is this guy? Greg Falkers was critical, it says, to the censorship operation at the heart of the COVID response. As chief of staff of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease, NIAID, Falkers oversaw operations for the agency's $6 billion budget and later sought to evade FOIA requests by conspiring with Dr. Morans, indicted, and intentionally misspelling key phrases such as gain of function. We can go further here. Here's a John Leake, Peter McCullough's publication, Focal Points, and he says this was from 2024, but the evidence is still there. Why aren't Daszak and Barrick arrested? That's Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance, Ralph Barrick of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And then we have Paul Thacker, journalist's article on Ralph Barrick, talking about hiding star researcher Ralph Barrick's ties to the global pandemic. It says the University of North Carolina researchers' work on coronaviruses and his connection to the Wuhan lab are now receiving renewed attention after real clear investigations learn that the federal government has quietly removed Barrick from all his NIH grants. RCI has also learned that UNC placed Barrick on leave. UNC has also refused to cooperate with NIH officials as they have attempted to gather more facts and emails about Barrick's coronavirus research. So Barrick now is completely sidelined. Grants canceled. He's been put on leave by the university. What do they know? What do they know? And why isn't this guy, I mean, they should be hauling this guy up every week in front of Congress to get, and why isn't the university giving emails up at this point? This is massive information. And then finally, speaking of the NIH, we have this exclusive report again by Paul Thacker. NIH virologist Vincent Munster caught smuggling deadly pathogens into the U.S., FBI investigating. What did they get caught? Well, he got caught with monkeypox on a plane coming back from Africa to his lab in Montana. So this is an ongoing investigation here.
Just carried it onto a plane, or did he
onto a plane? Yeah,
check the
in
bag?
a protected case. Yes, with no license to do this.
Wow, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So keeping an eye on that one. And I want to finish on really the vaccine conversation. Delia and I have talked about this before. We meet so many people that say, I don't have kids, or I don't have kids that are young anymore. I don't care about the vaccine conversation because it's about the childhood schedule, right? Well, if you lived through COVID, you should know that that's wrong. But if you didn't, you should look at this headline and realize it's not just about kids. Whooping cough surge exposes gaps in adult vaccination. And you go into this article and listen to this. It says, this is the heading, the case for life course vaccination. Remember that term. The failure of health systems to take a life course approach to immunization becomes more serious as populations age and immunity wanes over time. Comes from this document titled From 100-Day Cough to the 100-Year Life, Pertussis, Prevention in the Future Life Course Immunization. And you can see in here, it goes on to talk about that. They want to prioritize solutions. They want to improve detection and reduce infection rates. But they say they want to couple with strong life course immunization programs. These measures should be treated as a health security priority. When you see the word health security priority, think terrorism. Remember during COVID, that was a health security priority. That was used to censor everybody. That was used to shut down conversation. That was used to paint anti-vaxxers as terrorists by Homeland Security. So here we are again, and that's in the UK. But in the United States, in 2024, the FDA's VRBPAC committee produced this document from their meeting in 2024. That's the Vaccines and Related Biological Products Independent Committee. And let's look at this document talking about pertussis. They said, despite high vaccination coverage with acellular pertussis containing vaccines, the U.S. has experienced a resurgence in reported pertussis cases. This rise may be due to a combination of factors: genetic adaptation of circulating strains to escape vaccine pressure, rapid waning of acellular pertussis vaccine-induced immunity, and the failure of the acellular pertussis containing vaccines to prevent B. pertussis colonization, carriage, and transmission. So everything in that paragraph points to a failed vaccine. And that document goes on even further to say this: acellular pertussis containing vaccines induce helper T cells, Th2 memory, and neutralizing antibody responses that effectively prevent symptomatic disease. So it does not stop transmission. So it does not give mucosal immunity. So people are walking around, they don't have symptoms, but they have it in their nasal pharynx, they have it in their throat, and they can cough, they can transmit these things in public. It's kind of the opposite of the hantavirus, where people, when they show symptoms, they're down and out. They're on their back. They're not walking around going to school, going to work. These people are with whooping cough. And it didn't need the FDA to tell you this. In 2019, researchers came to that same conclusion when looking at the pertussis vaccine. They said this: acellular pertussis vaccines do not prevent colonization. Consequently, they do not reduce the circulation of B. pertussis and do not exert any herd immunity. And
strong
this is
word,
similar to,
any.
by the way, measles.
Yeah. No, it's strong to say it doesn't, any herd immunity. So all this argument, I got in this argument with a journalist recently and sent him all the data, some earlier than that, on this issue. We've discussed it on the show. If you're new to this show, most of the people watching say, yeah, you've covered this before. It doesn't stop transmission, which is even worse. If it's not stopping transmission, only hiding your symptoms, it's turning you into an unknowing, asymptomatic super spreader. You're walking around sick, but don't know it because you don't feel the symptoms and instead are spreading it everywhere. Whereas if you were sick, you'd probably stay home. If you had a cough, you would stay home. So, super interesting problem, and more science still pouring out, which begs the question, why are they still using this vaccine? It's causing more problems than it's helping.
Exactly. An inferior vaccine, and their answer, life course immunization. Just boosters, just more boosters for older people.
Right.
That's their answer. And they're going to market it to you like this. Remember this ad, GlaxoSmithKline, GSK, big bad whooping cough vaccination campaign bares its teeth. Remember this one? This was the big bad wolf, and it was scaring the elderly and saying, if you want to see your grandkids, you have to get this shot. Otherwise, you could be like this big bad wolf, and you could infect them and give them whooping cough and endanger their lives and spread disease. So if you want to see your kids and your family, you got to get this. Well, that didn't work so well for GSK because they got hit with a class action lawsuit. Here it is right here. GlaxoSmithKline Boostrix, that's the name of their vaccine, class action settlement. According to the class action lawsuit, the Big Bad Cough campaign misled consumers about Boostrix's ability to prevent whooping cough from spreading to others. Whoops. And if you're in New York and you saw that ad and that ad compelled you to get that shot, you can be part of this class action lawsuit. Here it is right here. Here's the link. Through June 8th. So you have less than a month to sign up for this. If you live in New York or vaccinated by Boostrix, or you live in New York State, this is you. If you fell for this campaign, which was based on what they call misinformation, you could be part of a class action lawsuit.
I just want to say to everyone watching, probably a few people on, watching our show got that. I would imagine some, because it was such a threat. Some people just said, I just want to see your grandbaby, and my kids wouldn't let me until I got the stupid vaccine, so I got it just so I could see them. So for all of you, if you're in New York, now you can sue, but also, you have friends. I mean, I've talked to so many grandparents that went through this because it was such a powerful pitch by every pediatrician. Every OB across the country was essentially just shilling or marketing for this product, GlaxoSmithKline. So almost every grandparent you know in New York could be a part of this lawsuit. Let them know that there might be some money to be made there. Great reporting, Jeffrey. It's all so incredibly interesting, and there's many ways to look at this. The media will push it one direction, but thank you for bringing balance to all sides of this conversation. Very, very important.
You bet. Thank you.
All right. I'll see you next week. Well, on that same front, really, we every week we have a new legal update. If you are signed up to our newsletter, you're receiving that update. If you're signed up to our newsletter, you're also receiving all the data. In fact, if you're like, oh, I missed what that class action lawsuit was, well, it'll be in your inbox with everything else from this show. Every single week, all you have to do is just sign up. Just go down the page to where it says Brave Bold News and just enter your email there. We don't share it with anybody, but you will now have all the evidence, and not just the little pieces we show you, links to the entire Tucker Carlson interview with Thomas Massey, links to the entire study on pertussis. It's just part of what we, we call it the high wire protocol. We're asking every other news agency to do the same thing. Show us your work. Where's your evidence? If there's been a double-blind placebo-based trial, print it out. Let us see it. Oh, you don't have it. Interesting. But today's legal release is very important. FOIA documents reveal New York bioethicist strategy to restrict vaccine exemptions. This has been since 2019. He acknowledged that facts alone are not enough to increase vaccine rates. And facts sometimes look weaker than they should, especially when they are weak facts, which he tacitly admits is unable to persuade people with his crappy science. Guilt hesitators and resistors. So guilt them is a much better approach. Call them selfish, bad neighbors, indifferent to the vulnerable. All things that we have heard and see when people go see their pediatricians. This is why I know we're going to win, by the way. I mean, I'm going to use this as sort of like, look what we're up against, but look what we're up against. This is literally the definition of insanity. They're going to keep doing the same thing. They're just going to keep bullying you and your friends and family members. And they're going to, when you ask a really important question like, have there been ever safety trials of saline placebos? I'm not going to get in the weeds in science. You would never understand it anyway. Just trust me, it's safe and effective, and we've been using it for years. Trust me, or I'm going to kick you out of the office. That's all they got. And so when he says, don't get into the weeds, don't try and talk science, it won't work, well, it's worked for us, and you know it's worked. The high wire has made it work. We've done nothing except talk about science with you. We took a different approach. We said, you know what, your average person does understand the science. It's also what my producers learned because most of us came over from the CBS talk show The Doctors, where we were turning science and medicine into entertainment. So they're dead wrong. People do get the science when you talk about it, but we're really up against it. It goes, there's more to this. There's a real pushback. They're going to try, and the vaccine education plan approved by the New York City Council. So now an education plan. It'll be bludgeoning with no facts because that's what they're going to do. The New York City Council on Thursday passed a package of bills, not just one, seeking to do more to educate parents about the safety and effectiveness of vaccines as immunization rates show signs of starting to dip. You're darn right they are. Listen to this. James Allwine, a virologist, professor emeritus at the University of Pennsylvania and visiting professor at the University of Arizona, is a member of Defend Public Health, a nationwide network of public health leaders that are all looking to gaslight you. He applauded the legislation and offered this advice for the health department on vaccine messaging. Keep it simple and straightforward while highlighting the harm that these preventable diseases can inflict on children. Stay out of the real science. Here we are again, out of the real science and data. That just doesn't work, Allwine told HealthBeat. You can't fight against what they're saying by trying to tell people, well, here's the science, here's the data, here's the study. Again, that's what the high wire does, and that's what Robert Kennedy Jr. has been doing, and that is what seems to be changing this conversation across the country. So how far do you think they're going to get? If they're going to keep showing up with a knife to a gunfight, I think this is all over. And of course, I'm talking about the power of truth, the power of words. But New York is under serious threat. Connecticut, serious threat. Maine, when we talk about freeing the five, it's not easy. It's super duper difficult. And look what we're up against. You have a nationwide team of scientists. The entire pharmaceutical industry is funding every medical university. All your doctors, they're the only ones not admitting the COVID vaccine's a disaster. They're so brainwashed. And some of them, like Senator Richard Pan, are going to try and get back into politics. Meanwhile, we have this little window with Robert Kennedy Jr., Donald Trump, whatever their relationship, you decide what it is. There's certainly a pause button on censorship. There's a moment where we have momentum and we can get a lot done right now. So ask yourself, who is getting it done? Feel pretty good about America's public health watchdog, ICAN, and the work that we've done. There's only one nonprofit that has Aaron Siri in 90 different cases. There's only one nonprofit that won back a religious exemption for an entire state in Mississippi, won it in West Virginia, but now, obviously, we're in the appellate court because it's being appealed, which means that could drive it all the way up to the Supreme Court, which I think would be fantastic. Let's go ahead and let the entire country experience religious and medical freedom. But that is only going to happen if we really get help from you. Right now, in this critical moment, we should not be relaxed. Obviously, even if we are seeing that there's some tumultuous things going on inside of the White House, we want to get as much done as we can, and we have a couple sponsors that have really taken it up a notch to make that happen. Right now, up until June 30th, we have a $1.5 million match. That may sound like a lot of money, and it is, but we need all we can get. These are lawsuits that are sitting in courtrooms year upon year upon year. You can't imagine what that costs, but if you donate right now, your money, every dollar you give is doubled. If you're thinking, boy, I suppose I could stretch and give $100, then do it. Or I could really, get to be a recurring donor. Whatever you want to do, this is the time to do it. Whatever we want to achieve, this is the time to achieve it. If not now, then when? And if it's not you, then who is it going to be? Look at our track record. That's what we stand by. 146 federal lawsuits have been filed. 516 document productions have been secured. 8 million pages have been released by the government of information, including the Pfizer data, the Moderna data, the VSafe data. Nobody else did that for you. Federal agencies, 23 of them have been taken to court. And here, we are going to be really starting to push the fact that we sue the government, man. And you are making that happen. Look at all those government agencies that we have put on blast. And we're making a difference. The world is changing around us. So please, if you want to donate right now, just go to the top of the page. You can hit donate. You can hit the QR code we just showed you. That will also be in the newsletter if you want to take a look at it. Love it if you become a recurring donor so that we know exactly how much we can expect. $26 a month for 2026 would be awesome. But $1 would be great if that's all you've got. Or $100, or if you're doing really well and you want to maybe have a special assignment. I want to fund a lawsuit or some piece of science that you're involved with. Reach out to us at info@icandecide.org and we'll get back to you and talk to you privately. If you're listening right now on a podcast, going to make it super easy. Here's the number, 72022. Pull out your cell phone right now, type in 72022, and write in the word donate, and I will respond immediately in a text back and make it super easy to become a part of the Informed Consent Action Network. This is a community-building experience. Every time we win a lawsuit, every time we change the world, I want you to be able to say, I actually had something to do with that. And every one of you that has been sponsoring and donating to us, thank you, because you are changing the world. Well, when you think about changing the world, one of the big things is obviously who you elect, who's president, and maybe breaking free of a global agency that ran a pandemic would be a good idea. This is what it looked like when Donald Trump withdrew us from the WHO.
United States officially completing its withdrawal from the World Health Organization.
The United States has officially left the World Health Organization.
What is this one?
Withdrawing from the World Health Organization, sir?
Ooh, that's a big one.
This is from the White House this morning. This fulfills President Trump's commitment under an executive order signed 1 year ago following the WHO's mishandling of COVID-19 and its ongoing lack of reform, accountability, and transparency.
The withdrawal means, among other things, all U.S. government funding to the organization has been terminated.
Its existence starting in 1948, Democrats and Republican presidents alike, all of them, realized that American national interest and security depended upon the World Health Organization.
The World Health Organization is responsible for coordinating disease surveillance. It sets vaccine standards. It's responsible for sharing transparent data among countries throughout the entire world.
This withdrawal for the U.S. is unprecedented, and I think it really is something new and concerning for all of us.
Well, I know I celebrated the moment we withdrew from the WHO. I don't like this organization. I think, does much more harm than good. And the pandemic, the way it just sort of seemed to galvanize the world against the citizens of the world was a horrific moment. But there may be a different perspective. Maybe we aren't as disentangled as we thought, and no better person to talk to than someone that used to work with the WHO, did studies and investigations for the WHO, I think was once considered a friend of the WHO. I'm talking, of course, about Tess Lawrie, one of the founders of World Council for Health. She joins me now. Tess, welcome.
Hello, Dale.
The WHO should have held you closer, I think. They should have kept you on the dole. But, of course, the pandemic was a huge shifting moment. We've talked a lot about it. But
well, they would have kept me on the dole, as you say, but I was always an independent consultant, so I was never on their payroll, so to speak. Yeah.
So they would brought you in for special projects, take a look at a study, see if we've done it right or if we're about to do it, ethics issues, things like that.
I would help to prepare clinical practice guidelines.
Okay. So tell me about this investigation that's been going on for the last couple of years in the WHO.
Yeah, Del, I actually feel a huge burden of responsibility to share this today because we've got such a short period of time and it's a massive investigation. It is the work of Lucinda van Buren, who is a nurse from Australia, who more than 2 years ago realized when she was to be force vaccinated or mandated to be vaccinated in an Australian hospital, and she refused. She realized that the nursing system in Australia was a WHO collaborating centre, as was AHPRA, the regulatory body of Australia, and she wondered, what are WHO collaborating centres?
Wow.
So she started this long investigation, honestly, day and night for the last 2 years, completely voluntary. So I do, she deserves an award. And what she's exposed is really, it's really very sensitive. It has huge implications for all of us, and I think it's probably going to be too mind-boggling for many people to grasp right now.
Okay.
But it will unfold, and thank you for the opportunity to at least present the first.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing it, and thank you for your continued work. And Lucinda, sounds amazing. So she realizes what's going on here. She looks in her own hospital and finds that we're a WHO, what's it called?
Collaborating centre.
A WHO collaborating centre. Okay.
Yeah, so it's really interesting just even watching those clips that you showed before I came on, how, there's this emphasis on the WHO. The WHO is coordinating this and doing that and creating vaccines and things, and that's not the case at all. This is what the investigation shows, is the WHO is just a messaging and implementation tool of what's been called a global health security agenda.
Okay.
And they simply are the mouthpiece. What informs them are a network or web of these collaborating centres. There's more than 800 around the world and in 80 countries. Every country has various collaborating centres. And they range from, a variety of subjects, but there is a preponderance on pandemics and vaccines and pathogens and health security policy and healthcare system and regulatory strengthening and all of that sort of thing.
Right.
But there are 70 in the U.S.
Okay.
So Lucinda's
So
investigation.
still, even though we parted from WHO, we have these 70 collaborating WHO centers in America.
Yes, well, in actual fact, it really is relatively meaningless to say that the USA has exited the WHO. All they really have done is perhaps withdrawn that relatively small amount of money given, because what the WHO collaborating center agreements do is they facilitate what they call funding opportunities for from private partners. So collaborating centers get this funding opportunity, and we do have a little segment I can read for you from the guide, the WHO guide for collaborating centers.
Okay.
So hopefully that can come up. There
Right.
we go. So it says WHO collaborating centers are institutions that have been solid WHO allies for years, helping WHO to implement its mandated work and achieve its current goals. WHO CCs cooperate with WHO on a diverse range of activities, such as collecting data for a report, organizing a meeting, or developing a guideline. I mean, that is such an understatement because it's developing vaccines, developing antigens, and so on. But it does go on to say that there are benefits from this collaboration. It's a win-win situation because the collaboration can bring in this funding opportunity with our partners, organizations, so partner corporations.
Okay, so it's really corporate partnership. This is like, I'm assuming Pfizer and Sanofi and
well, in actual
biotech
fact,
companies.
a lot of organizations that call themselves philanthropists as well. So there's Gates, there's the Gates Foundation. There's it's actually numerous. There's just any corporation you can name is backing somewhere, and a lot of the funding is not obvious. You have to dig down. So, what we've presented in an overview report, which was published in January, this is the World Council for Health overview report of USA collaborating centers, shows that there's 70 active collaborating centers. And this was when we downloaded the data, these contracts from the WHO. We were unable to access that website subsequently after I presented the evidence at a meeting in October.
Really?
The website was taken down. But there were 70 active ones then. There were 330 discontinued ones. But then there were 97 missing numbers because they're consecutively numbered. So altogether for the USA at the moment, there's something like 503, but there's 97 contracts that are missing. And we would very much like to know what those are. Our FOIA requests, where we have sent to collaborating centers, generally come back ignored. We'll get the initial reaction and then they just ignore. So they do seem to be above the law in many ways. But just to say that the USA has the most number of collaborating centers, and then there's China, which has 59 or so. And these are active ones in India, the UK, Australia, and so on, Switzerland, Italy, and European countries. But they are all over. And the point of it is that the WHO is not making the policy. So we've seen, that they're negotiating the pandemic treaty. They've actually adopted the pandemic treaty pending the agreement of the pathogen access and benefit sharing system or scheme. And this is a scheme where if a pandemic gets declared, call it hantavirus, hantavirus pandemic, for example, there's then a mechanism whereby the vaccine reference material, the virus and vaccine reference material is shared and disseminated. So, and then there's a sort of just divvying up who gets to make what. So it's sort of divvying up the spoils of a pandemic.
An opportunity, really.
Yeah.
They see these as opportunistic moments, and they have a network that can come and feed off of that moment and provide whatever their specialty is and pull money or systems, or like whether, I would guess, like vaccine tracking systems, and we can make a vaccine, and all of that sort of ramps up from all of these different threads.
But what's really interesting is that whilst all eyes are focused on stopping this WHO pathogen access and benefit sharing system going ahead, what Lucinda's investigation shows us that it's been going on for a very long time, and the coronavirus pandemic was a huge success, and this is why they want to formalize the arrangement with, you get this and you get that percent, and everybody, and it's in the pandemic treaty, article, I can't remember what the article, maybe 21, it says, equitable sharing of monetary and non-monetary benefits. So this is a financial arrangement, and this is what's taking so long for them to agree. But what's really important is for people to realize it doesn't matter much, really, whether they agree that or not, because this is a system that's been entrenched for a long time. These pathogens are being made in the institutions like the CDC in Atlanta and other.
So there's collaborations with CDC in this.
Yes.
That you can track.
I would love to be able to show you a couple of the agreements that we've downloaded, and there's so many, and I had to just choose a few.
Okay.
But just to show you, hopefully people will be able to see the implications.
Okay.
And we could start with the one from the Office of the Lead for Global Health Security. So this is really interesting. I pulled this up because people will know that the international health regulations and the amendments to the international health regulations were passed last year, and they'd been in negotiation for some time. Well, in actual fact, the USA is so deeply involved, they actually have the lead, the Office of the Lead for the Global Health Security Agenda and the international health regulations. And,
you haven't really pulled yourself out of a collaboration if it's being led out of the United States of America.
No. And there's a university, Johns Hopkins as well, which is very much involved in the global health security agenda. So this is their role, it seems, and the designation you can see was 2019. And these are 4-year contracts, and then they get renewed. Some of them have been running for a very long time.
Good time to get a contract in health, 2019 for 4 years.
Exactly, about global pandemics.
That was a really good 4 years.
You will remember as well that the term health security came in around then as well.
Right.
The UK's health security agency used to be called Public Health England, and then suddenly we've got this term health security and global health security. Well, it's coming from these institutions, not the WHO. The WHO is just messaging.
So like the media is sort of like it's the press box out in front of the whole thing.
Yes, and telling the countries what to do. And it was really obvious, recently with the Indian court case or petition for the Indian government and officials to show whether a virus existed or not, and to prove that they had a virus, a coronavirus that caused a pandemic. And they've been unable to manifest this. So governments around the world, with respect to COVID, never received or isolated a coronavirus. They received reference material from the CDC in Atlanta, and the countermeasure, the vaccines, that were disseminated through the infrastructure that had been set up for influenza decades ago. So, this is on the CDC website, that they were instrumental in disseminating the coronavirus reference material and vaccines because they had this infrastructure already set up for a very long time.
This is interesting.
Yeah. I'd like to actually speak a bit about the CDC's influenza division, because it came about, the CDC was actually set up in 1946, which is the same year that the WHO was set up.
Really?
Yes.
That's convenient.
And their first big recommendation was DDT.
Who set it up, and was there people
Well,
behind it?
it does seem to have been set up by the US government. But Coca-Cola donated some land and has continued to fund the Center for Disease Control. Yes.
Coca-Cola funds the Center for Disease Control.
Not directly, but through a CDC foundation, which is how they've got around the regulations about being privately funded.
Right.
So they set up a CDC foundation where Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation and all these other private entities are able to fund what goes on at the Center for Disease Control, which is now called the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. But originally, it came out of the war, So
1946.
Yeah.
Yep.
In actual fact, during the war, Rockefeller Foundation invested in the Naval Military Research Unit, or units, whose aim was to find pathogens of military importance. And malaria was their big, the Rockefeller Foundation's big activity then. And then out of the wartime malaria institution of, I'm not sure exactly what it was called, came the CDC. So the CDC then settled in Atlanta, did the DDT spraying. Of course, DDT,
that was the
we
first
now
big
know.
mission. Like, we're here, we're going to help you. Let's spray DDT everywhere.
Yeah, and in actual fact, that's a neurotoxin. It paralyzes insects, but it also has an effect, neurodegenerative and toxic effect on the human system. And so decades later, we became aware that in actual fact it causes polio-like symptoms, it causes Alzheimer's.
It's pointed to, it's very written in detail by Suzanne Humphreys.
Yes.
Dissolving Illusions, that really the polio outbreak very much could have been just a DDT poisoning reaction.
And then interestingly, their next gig was influenza. And influenza was a disease, virus, that was isolated firstly, again, in one of these naval military research units that was set up, during World War II. And this one was in the Great Lakes. So you can see there I have a little slide of a document which states that in 1954, this NAMRU-4, this Naval Medical Research Unit, was the first lab to ever isolate influenza virus. And then it goes on to say that they used that it was ideal because they had a large recruit training command with members arriving from all over the US. And the troops were basically expected to experience outbreaks of respiratory illness periodically. So they were experimenting on the troops, and they came up with influenza virus and vaccines to go with it. So that's
so just 8 years into the CDC's development, you have a group created by the Rockefeller, which we see. I mean, we can talk about how Rockefeller destroyed chiropractic and homeopathy, wanted to move everything into petroleum-based drugs and pharmaceuticals, the heart of pharmaceutical. But what it appears you're stumbling upon is he used the Navy to say, go and find pathogens. And then once we find a pathogen, we're going to immediately start working on this idea of a vaccine. So it's almost like what we're watching with hantavirus. Let's make you afraid of something. I was joking with Jeffrey that doesn't matter if 10 people are dying from it, we'll make a vaccine and make everybody afraid of it, which is sort of the tail wagging the dog. Like, did you have a problem, or did we manufacture a problem and then manufacture a product at the same time?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. So I'd like to fast forward a couple of decades now, or several decades, to even hantavirus now. And let's look at the Hemorrhagic Fevers Collaborating Center, if we could pull that up.
Is there such a thing? Great.
Yes.
That's a lovely place.
The CDC has a group called the Viral Special Pathogens Branch, which is the division of high consequence pathogens and pathology. Pathology. Yes, pathology. National Center for Emerging Zoonotic Infectious Diseases. And that's the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And we've got two director heads there, Dr. Joel Montgomery and Dr. Christina Spiropoulou. So he seems to have a military background. He was captain, and he's worked in NAMRU 6 down in Peru, where they've got a zoonotic unit there, animal experimentation. And there's also extensive animal experimentation going on in Atlanta CDC, where they have a biohazards lab 4. And both the heads of that department, Montgomery and Spiropoulou, they have a number of publications looking, with animal research and monkeys and mice and rats and guinea pigs and so on, looking at all of these very, very rare pathogens, as they are called, Lassa fever, Congo Crimean fever, hantavirus, Marburg, monkeypox. All of these things are in their repertoire of research papers. So it does pose very important questions about the origins of disease and indeed of viruses. It certainly suggests that what we experienced as a COVID pandemic was not a pandemic, but was a way of getting vaccines, if we call them vaccines, into people, biological.
Are you suggesting that these viruses, are you leaning now in a direction that these viruses may not actually exist, or is the way we describe viruses, the pathogen that you and I are going to spread and breathe, that, I've heard people say the only way you can spread a pathogen is you're going to have to inject it into everybody?
I think this certainly raises questions, and it does support, examining this infrastructure and seeing that you have a chain reaction. You have an organization like the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, with these laboratories messing about and adding bits of genetic material, and they're coming from banks, privately owned gene banks and stuff. They're mixing those together and they're calling it a virus, and then and they're preparing these vaccines to them. I studied many years ago, and I enjoyed my microbiology and virology lectures, but there was never this whole range of viruses that seem to have popped up since, and there seems to be a new virus every day. Which brings me to another point. Johns Hopkins University has been a collaborating center for vaccine epidemiology and evaluation, and the terms of this agreement were to support WHO's Immunization 2030 agenda. Now, the WHO's Immunization 2030 agenda, to write it as well, is about what you showed earlier with Jeffrey Jackson, that injections for adults as well. Well, this is injections from birth to the grave. Basically, they say vaccines are important for every phase of your life, and they have 500 vaccines scheduled. I don't know if they mean individually for everyone to have, but they have they plan to have a library of 500 vaccines by 2030, and that's the Immunization Agenda 2030. That's again Johns Hopkins.
Okay, I have been warning people this is the future. These lunatics want to vaccinate you for, every virus and bacteria on planet Earth. And who needs 500 vaccines? Who needed one? We're only at 17 so far and counting. It seems to be nothing but harm in my perspective, the work that we've done, the science that we've done. But it's interesting as you talk about, I know I've got people in this audience right now that are jumping up. There it is, Del, right? There it is. There is no virus, train theory, all of that. I'm not shying away from that conversation. And I do have to say, when you make me think about it, hantavirus, like the joke that I had with Jeffrey, it can only, whatever it does, however it's spread, let's say it resonates and they're not breathing it, they just caught each other's vibes somehow. And if that's what some of these people are saying is happening, I'm sure I'd be just as afraid of being stuck on a boat, whether I'm resonating with something or breathing something from them. But it still only kills and seems to spread to 4 people, maybe 6 or 7. It's tiny. But you have North Korea, to your point, making a vaccine, and if they get away with it, I keep worrying about gain of function, that Ralph Barrick is splicing together to try and make something that spreads. But what you're making me think is the fastest spreading disease there is the moment you can convince everybody to inject themselves with that pathogen. Right? If I can make you afraid of the 7, but I can get 7 billion to inject themselves because they make us worry about that 7, then I just created the fastest spreading, mission accomplished if I'm trying to, have diseases, right?
The vaccine is the pathogen.
It is the pathogen.
Yeah.
That is fascinating. And actually does connect several dots.
Yeah. And I think, one must, give credit to doctors like Dr. Sam Bailey and Mark Bailey in New Zealand, because they have been raising awareness of this for a long time. And certainly for myself, I've been keeping things in a balance and just, trying to think, how can this be? How do we understand this? But what Lucinda's work has shown is that it provides the how they've been able to do this, and it's been long-standing in collaboration with military and these private funders, these private donors, and now CDC and the FDA. And just to finish the story, actually, if you think about the CDC presenting the reference material and to be sent off using its infrastructure, and not to mention their patents as well, linked to all of these products that are being developed by these institutions. There's the FDA Center for Biologics and Research Evaluation and Research. Mm-hmm. And I think that's WHO CC 289, perhaps you could pull that up. They're the ones who rubber stamped everything for the world. So
the FDA did.
Yeah. So, because the...
Look at that, Peter Marks. Look at that. Look who's the director and head there. Peter Marks is a part of it. Think he wanted to find any issue with the vaccine they were trying to inject into everybody? I mean,
he said in 2021, he said, I am the FDA point person for the COVID vaccines. We'll make sure they're safe and effective.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they went and approved, or conditionally approved the Pfizer one, and they approved Comirnaty and they just said these are the same vaccines.
They're not totally different.
But it doesn't really. But actually, it renders it all meaningless, pointless anyway to argue any of that now. Or what we need to do is focus on how this was implemented. And not just look at the heads. It's very easy to look at the heads and say, and because they rotate the heads, they move them. Once they've done their time,
really,
then
right? They've got branches everywhere.
But
I'm sure you could cut one off; it won't matter.
Yeah, what we really have to do is look. It's not one person who's done all of this. There's a whole lot of people working in those labs, experimenting on those millions of animals that are slaughtered every year for vaccine production. And so we need to look at every level, and we need now to have deep and thorough investigation to, the administrative staff at all levels, the lab staff, we need to understand how this has happened, so that it can never happen again, because clearly they have a whole lot of what they call viruses at their disposal that they're planning to keep these pandemic things going as a racket.
Well, they plan on injecting us. Do you have a sense of why?
Well, there certainly is an ideology associated with this, and it is a eugenics ideology. Henry Kissinger said if you can get people to accept force-mandated vaccination, you can get them to accept anything. So this is very much an anti-human agenda, and the idea of diminishing all of us, and it's a control agenda, really.
Yeah.
You know, it's about control, ultimate power.
You're doing such amazing work. World Council for Health is brilliant, and I know when I talk to you, like, I don't want to be like called the head of it or something, because it's really about diversifying power, decentralizing it, really.
Yes.
Instead of, so your reaction to WHO, it's not a singular thing. We need to just, all start working towards this. But it takes funding to do the work. So is there a way to, if people want to donate to the work that you're doing, the investigations that you're doing?
Yes, I would ask this body of work, and I just want to highlight that Lucinda van Buren has produced this work voluntarily for the world. Committing all her time the last couple of years, did not get paid a cent for this. Wow. And there's a huge body of work that still needs to be done, because we can go subject by subject. We can look into viral hemorrhagic fevers. There's all these countries with different collaborating centers. They've got water, they've got all sorts. We need support. We need real, proper support, and we also need attention. We need people like Aaron Siri and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and we need their time. We need to brief people who are realizing that the system has been corrupted from inside out.
Yeah.
And we can help you. We can brief you. So please do call us. You can email me directly at tess@worldcouncilforhealth.org.
That was crazy. Here it is, everyone.
Yeah.
worldcouncilforhealth.org. You can donate up there at top. There's a button, and you have this amazing conference coming up. I'm going to be helping MC. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, there's a better way. I mean, if you've been listening to all I've said so far, you know there is a better way, and that's been our slogan since 2022, and we're sticking with it. So this is a Better Way conference. Del, you've been to our Better Way conferences before. You've brought such wonderful
energy. The famous argument between me and Geert van den Bosch will live in infamy happened at a Better Way conference.
Argue? We don't argue. We value different perspectives. That's part of our ethos. But we do like a good discussion and debate.
A good row.
Yeah. But our conferences are really uplifting. They're solutions focused, and you might have heard now that the WHO is messaging for corporations. Well, we are messaging for grassroots advocacy groups and experts, diverse health practitioners who have been silenced for ages. And we've got really the most amazing lineup of speakers. We've got 6 panels. You're on day 1 as the MC, and we have day 2. We've got Brett Weinstein. And on day 1, we've got this most amazing panel, which has Dr. Brian Ardis on it and Jan Jekalek, both of them with very interesting perspectives. And I have to say that one of the most interesting things that has come out of, well, another one of these interesting things that has come out of this WHO-CC investigation is the number of blood, snake venom, rabies, and other sorts of collaborating subject matters, I should say, which actually, if you know Brian Ardis's work, Dr. Ardis has been saying that the spike protein is very similar to snake venom, and he obviously presents it. I can't remember the name of the 2 snakes, but anyway, it's very compelling, and he certainly has stuck with his research on that. Looking at the WHO collaborating centers, you can see that they have interests, and these are subject matters that they have centers looking at. So again, you can see things coming together with the work. Anyway, I know we're supposed to be talking about the conference, so let me.
No, so the panels, these conversations are going to probably get really in depth with perspectives that have been out there. Brian Ardis has had some amazing hypotheses and laid out some really critical information, and lots of people, I know many people slapping on nicotine patches, you know.
Yes, and there's
because of the work that he's put out there.
And there's a huge number of collaborating centres looking at tobacco control, which is also very interesting, nicotine control. So they don't want people taking nicotine again.
Wow.
You know, they've got a whole system in place to surveil and control nicotine. So it's very, very interesting. And we'll be discussing all of these new things and also discussing solutions especially. And you know, our conferences are really, the speakers don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
They've got very short time and they've got to get their points across, solutions, and then a discussion. And we do take some questions from the audience. So we would really encourage people to come. It's in Providence, Rhode Island. It's our first USA conference, so it's super exciting
Wonderful.
for us. Hosted by our World Council for Health New England team. So we're looking forward to introducing them to everybody. And
we have a Highwire discount, everybody. If you, let's see, how does that work? Highwire 10. So I guess you write in Highwire 10, you get a 10% discount to go to that amazing conference. And look at that lineup. I mean, just look at all those people. It's really stunning.
Yeah, I mean, and all of those people are offering their time to us for free. They get 15 minutes, you know, in the limelight on their own, and then they're on a panel. So I think it really is testimony to, you know, the brand that we've created. You know, it's the World Council of Health and the Better Way. You know, this is really a movement. The Better Way brand is really. We all know there's a better way. It's you know, it's so.
There better be.
So we're going to co-create it together. It's not something we're going to say this is it. It's like let's co-create it, yeah, so I think there was something else.
Call to actions or something that you know, for our audience, you know, that's watching right now. I think some of the times it just feels like out of my reach. What can I do about it other than support the work that you're doing?
There's so much. Better way, you know, better way. Just choose a thing that you think is a better way. Maybe it's food, you know, whatever, organic food, whatever it is. You can contribute to a better way by doing the thing that you feel passionate about, the thing that you really love to do. You know, there's so many people who are unhappy and worried, and that if you just choose one thing you actually love to do, then you'll already be on the path to a better way and co-creating a better world with all of us. I just do remember what I wanted to say.
Okay.
You don't have to be at the conference in person. We've got online. We're live streaming it.
Okay,
so,
great.
Yeah, so we want everybody there. It's just, you know, it's 2 great days. If you can't get there in person, you can watch online, and you can watch a panel at a time, invite your friends over, have a barbecue, start the conversation. You know, it's really a wonderful, it's a wonderful event. I can't encourage people strongly enough to find some way to be there, be it in person or online. And we have an amazing gala dinner if you do get there in person, because we have live music with Joseph Arthur and Mel Gabriel. So,
Sounds wonderful, Tess. Thank you for all the incredible work you've done over the years. You bring such light to this conversation, and it can seem dark, but I agree. If everyone just does the thing that they're guided to do, then we do take this world to a better place. So if you are interested, both watching online or going to Providence, Rhode Island, here is what the conference is going to be like. Well, look, just amazing things happening. You know, it's a battle, right? It's a battle. We're in the thick of it now. We are really standing our ground for the future of our children, of our grandchildren, and, you know, as the Native Americans say, 7 generations ahead. Better Way Conference would be a great way just to connect. Amazing speakers there. This is an international show. The High Wire is watched in countries all around the world, and I actually want to come out and meet some of you, which is why I've agreed to do more traveling than usual, especially because we have this great tool with this film, An Inconvenient Study, that's now been seen by over 100 million people worldwide. But we're going to be doing some screenings. I'm going to be in Italy. So if you're in Italy and you're watching the show or you have friends there, we're in Italy from May 20th to the 28th. Here are those dates: May 21st in Milan, May 22nd in Padua. We're in Rome, May 24th. Definitely want to check that out. And then almost immediately after it, I'm heading to Poland from June 5th to 6th, and then look how tight that is. Then June 6th through 8th, I got a quick flight and a bunch of speaking there. I'm going to be in Japan the 20th through the 21st, and then Aruba July 1st and 2nd speaking. If you're interested in any of those, some of those dates we've shown you, but certainly just be following my socials. I'm going to keep you up to date as I get details on those dates as they're coming together right now. I'll be sharing that along with all the other fun stuff I talk about. So at Del Bigtree is the way to follow me on all my social media. But, you know, you should be also watching at Highwire Talk, at Highwire Plus, at Del Bigtree. Subscribe to our YouTube. We're back on YouTube. We'll love it if all of you sign up. Let's just see how long it lasts. Why don't we just see if we can put so much pressure there that they have to wonder whether they should cancel us again. Anyway, there's, you know, I just want to say this. Politics is politics, right? And this is not a political show. We're all about, you know, expressing, showing you what's out there, showing what we're up against, making media. We do jump in and try to make a difference. We're about being activists. We're trying to inspire you to get up in the morning and just as Tess said, do what you feel you're guided to do, because every one of us, I believe, has a special talent that is especially needed right now and in this moment. But as we look at the politics that's out there, they're going to try to divide us. They're going to try to make us feel like we're afraid. That is what the media does. Just like it makes us afraid of an issue that's killed 3 people, maybe it could sell a vaccine to 7.2 billion people. That's how they think, and they're good at it. So every time you find yourself buying into the panic on a cruise ship or buying into the divide between Robert Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump, take a minute, sit down, get quiet. Sure, there's always the possibility it's true. Maybe 3 people did die. Maybe 11 are at risk. Maybe Robert Kennedy Jr.'s days are numbered inside of the government. But all along the way, we have just been doing the best that we can with every single moment and gaining ground. That's all you can do in life. You know, I thought about this the other day, especially as I was leaving. I might have said this before. As I was leaving Washington, D.C. after an incredible week, people will say, well, what's the plan, Del? How's this going to work? Or where's it going to go? They asked that of Vani Hari and I and everybody that was going to what can I expect at the rally? What's going to happen because of it? Those are all like asking a surfer, you know, can he make the waves bigger today? Is it going to be a 10-foot wave, a 3-foot wave, a 5-foot wave? You know, the only thing we can do as surfers is surf that damn wave as best we can, no matter how big it is. Maybe it's a 60-foot wave, I'll go grab a smaller board. Or maybe it's a little wave, we'll grab a long board. But either way, we are going to win the day. So while we have Robert Kennedy Jr., let's take advantage of it. But anyone that tries to tell you that somehow the end of Robert Kennedy Jr. or the strength that he has in government defines what MAHA is, as though MAHA can be divined, MAHA is you. MAHA is your brother, it's your sister, it's your child. MAHA is about being healthy. And maybe if you want to call it something else because the name feels too close to MAGA, do that. It's medical freedom. It's freedom, period. It's body sovereignty. But no matter what happens in Washington, D.C., they're not going to take it away from us. They're not taking us apart. We're not going anywhere. In fact, we're growing every single day. So whatever the newspapers want to report about what politicians are doing, they're just politicians. And they work for us. Whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or libertarians, They're our employees. Don't forget that. And act accordingly. I'll see you next week on The High Wire.